Alright guys, so I am down here in my reptile room. I got a whole bunch of stuff going on. I kind of wanted to show you what I have happening here in my snake room. I have multiple things all at once. So take a look at this. I actually set up my my heat lamp. I'm doing some frozen thawed mice. This is how I thaw out my mice from Rodent Pro before I feed. I'm going to feed some of my pickier ball pythons. And then I was peeking through some of my female ball pythons over in these racks here, and sure enough, one of them laid eggs. So what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to pull those eggs and I'm going to set them up in the egg box in the incubator. Kind of want to show you how I do that. And then another thing I got going on, multiple things all at once. I was actually preparing some fresh substrate, this coconut husk. I use Pro Cocoa and break it up, and I was replacing all the coconut husk in these big tubs, moving all my females. So essentially I just have these females on the bottom that I just had to clean, and I'll be completely done with cleaning all the tubs. And I was moving over this pinstripe female, and this is kind of right in the middle of the breeding season, and I noticed she is ovulating. And when they ovulate, basically from here all the way down here, gets really thick and bloated, if you can see that. And what that is the eggs are being fertilized as they go through the ovulation, and then either you get slugs, which are infertile eggs, or you get fertile eggs. But one good thing is, now that she's ovulating, you definitely know that this girl is going to lay some eggs. So we definitely know we're going to have some more eggs from this pinstripe. I'll have to look up the breeding to see what it was, but I have it all recorded. It's really interesting. We're going through getting a lot of eggs, having snakes ovulate. And what I'm going to do from here is I'm actually going to pull this female, is actually this pastel female up here. I'm going to pull her down. We'll take her eggs, and I'll show you how I set them up in the incubator. Okay, so I completely switched gears here and moved everything out. This is the stuff I need for setting up my ball python eggs. There's a lot of stuff here. Then I'm going to go through it one by one. And the ball python is actually up on the top. I got my little step stool out here, so we'll hop up on the step stool. And she is in this tub right here. It's a pastel. And I actually crossed her with my bamboo. So we'll get some bamboos, some pastel bamboos, some pastels, and some normals. And it looks like she has a whole bunch of eggs. That is a lot of eggs. And usually these ball pythons can get a little bit snippy when they're kind of protecting their eggs. She's got, it looks like she's okay, not too aggressive. And it looks like she kicked one egg out. This egg over here, this is a slug, an infertile egg, so that one's definitely not going to hatch. But the rest of them, I'll have to look and see. Those look like all really good eggs. So let me pull this tub and we'll set up these eggs. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get this female off of these eggs, and you definitely want to come from the back. You never want to come from the front, because you know you have to watch the feeding mode and you have to watch the breeding mode. Sometimes if you just take them out and kind of mess with them a little bit, not even hardly even touch them, sometimes they'll come off just because they kind of get in kind of a flight mode. You can see she's kind of bucking me right now a little bit, but you just kind of have to be careful. Once you get them off, they're perfectly fine. And then what you want to do is you want to kind of feel their body to make sure they don't have any more eggs in their body. She looks like she's laid them all, so this was really good. As a matter of fact, I saw her when she first started laying the eggs, and I decided just to leave her alone for a couple hours to make sure she laid them all, so I didn't mess her up. And I'm going to put her in this tub over here. Actually, I just put some fresh coconut husk substrate in this big boa tub, and that'll be a perfect temporary housing for this girl. Okay, so I did a quick count. That is 7 eggs, and then we have this little slug egg. This is not fertile. It's not even worth incubating. You can actually eat these. I've seen people eat them. I actually put it in the freezer or the refrigerator once, and then kept it in there for a little bit, and then tried to eat it. And the funny thing is it turned colors. It turned yellow, got really hard, and it was absolutely disgusting. So if you're thinking about eating one of these, I would try a fresh one. I'm actually not going to do it this time. Maybe next time I'll be brave enough, if I have a few of those, I'll cook them up and see what a fresh slug tastes like. But I always like to use gloves because these are in the incubator for actually 2 months. And 2 months at about 90 degrees, let me tell you, you can have a lot of mold and fungus and whatnot kind of causing problems in there. So what I'm going to do from here is pull it off the bottom. These are not stuck to the bottom, which is good. And take a look at those beauties. Those are some beautiful eggs. And what I like to do, some people just put all these in the incubator just like they are, but the thing I found is the embryos are not always faced up, and I've read some articles that say you get a better hatch rate if all the embryos are actually on the top. So I always like to separate them. Another reason I like to separate my eggs is because if I have a bad one, then I can separate it easily from the rest of the clutch without having to trying to separate them after they're in the incubator. And usually, you know, so right now it's pretty easy to separate them. Fairly easy. You want to go really, really slow when you're separating eggs, and it's kind of almost like a leathery, and they're kind of stuck together. It's kind of interesting how they're stuck, and if you go really slow, they're pretty easy to separate. And it's just personal preference. I think I'm one of the few people that really like to separate all the eggs all the time. I think it's a lot better in the long run, and since we only have 7 eggs, we should be able to fit them all in one egg box. Usually I'll do like 7 or 8. If there's more than that, I'll split it up into 2 boxes. And this one is the last one. There, separated. And really, when you're messing with eggs like this, you want to be really careful because there's a whole network of veins in there, and you definitely don't want to mess up that network of veins in the, even when they're just hatched, they have veins in them. Unlike a chicken egg, they don't develop the eggs until later. So the next thing I do is I use my marker and my flashlight, and I'll actually candle them and figure out where the embryo is and mark it so I can put them on top. So let me shut out some of these lights here. I have a whole bunch of lights. And then we'll candle these. And you can see when I candle them, this is actually, it's a little kind of a round, kind of a jiggly little mass right there. You can see it kind of jiggle around. And that is where the embryo is, right there. And I just usually put a little X right on the embryo. And you really want to be careful. You definitely don't want to drop any of these eggs at this point. Not that they'll actually crack, but I think you could damage the veins on the inside. So this one, let's see. I actually did a little marking last time where I marked it as they were laid, and then I marked it after I moved them, and some of them were almost completely opposite of when they were laid. Let's take a look at this one here. Embryo is right there, kind of where it was stuck on the side. Let's take a look at this one. You can see the embryo kind of jiggling around right there. Ooh. I'm always kind of nervous about this. Oh, I already did that one. Alright, let's see. 2 more to go. So you got the embryo right here. And then on the last one, this one's real easy to see. It has the embryo right there. You can kind of jiggle it around and see it. Alright. So that is marking the embryos and candling the eggs. And the next thing I do is I'm going to actually put these kind of back up in here in the rack system and just hold them here temporarily. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my egg box. And I'll show you how I set up the egg box. Let me turn a few lights on here again. And this is the egg box I use. This is essentially just like a shoe box kind of a deal. And I actually used these last year. And this year what I did is I actually went through and sterilized the whole thing. I soaked it in bleach. And what you want to do is you want to add 50-50 vermiculite water. So what I'm actually going to do is I want to add the water first this time. And the reason is because I use my big syringe for treating my cattle with ivermectin. And I don't have another big syringe, so I'm just going to kind of guess to see until I get 200 grams of water here. And this water is about 90 degrees. Alright, so now I'm close. 155. I have a small syringe that I'm using. And the reason I like syringes is because it's really, you can really get in the last little bit of water to get pretty precisely. I like to have 200 grams of water and 200 grams of vermiculite. So we're at 197, 198, 199.3, 199, 199.8. You add a few drops there. That is exactly 200.0. And then from here, I'm just going to tare it, which is basically just zeroes out the balance. And then I use vermiculite. And what I use, I get this stuff from Home Depot. It's fairly expensive, but it goes a long way. And it's more of a fine grain vermiculite. And it takes just about 4 cups of vermiculite. So that's 3. And then we'll do the last one here. 186. 192. Whoa! I overshot just a little bit. Let's see. 198. 199. That's another reason I like to do the vermiculite. Last. Alright, that is exactly 200.0. And then what you really want to do is you want to mix it up. And some people just go by feel as far as adding the vermiculite in the water, but it's just so much easier for me to actually mix it by weight. Then you don't have, there's no guesswork at all. For me, it almost seems like it's almost too dry, but keep in mind this is enough water in here to where you don't have too much, where it's not oversaturated, but you have enough that'll keep the humidity at the right point for the next 2 months, which is pretty incredible. And kind of the telltale sign that you have enough water in your vermiculite is if you take a fist or a little handful of it, it should clump together, but it shouldn't drain any water out. So that is the perfect amount of vermiculite. And then from here, what I like to do is kind of spread it out and push it down, make sure it's nice and even. This vermiculite seems like it's really kind of fluffy and it fluffs up, and you definitely want enough space between the vermiculite and the top to where the eggs don't touch the top. And then I use this egg crate, and this egg crate I bought on eBay from China, and I just cut the corners out so it would fit in here, and you definitely want it flat and straight across. And from here, you really want to put the eggs on there, so let me grab the eggs here real quick. Alright, and then you want all the embryos facing up. This one, and this one. And then this is our little sterile egg there. So now, as far as the eggs, you definitely don't want them to touch the side. You definitely don't want them to touch the top. And we actually put press and seal on the top. And what I like to do is I kind of like to lean them up together against each other, so they don't roll around as much. Some people use toothpicks or different things, and I just kind of like to get them snugged up against each other so they can't really roll around that much. You definitely don't want them to roll against the sides. That's the big thing. And you don't want them to roll so the embryo's not on top. Okay, so that is essentially the perfect setup. And then what you want to do is I use this press and seal. The press and seal essentially just seals in the moisture, but it's still a breathable plastic. And let's see. I don't know if you've ever used press and seal before, but it's really nice. You just press it on there and it seals. It's some pretty awesome stuff. I've never actually used it until I started hatching ball python eggs, and it's really some interesting stuff. It'd be great in the kitchen, actually. It seals a lot better than anything else. And then what I do is I just put the lid on, and then I'll label it with the cross, what I bred together, and then the hatch date, and then the date that the eggs were laid. Okay, so then I kind of cheat. I use my phone to figure out the hatch date. Okay, Google, what will be the date in 60 days?
It is Wednesday, the 26th of June, 2019.
That is cheating. Alright, so this is what the labels look like. It's basically the laid date, the hatch date, and my pastel number 1 crossed with my bamboo male. Okay, so as far as labeling this box, I actually put the cross and then the laid and hatch date on the top, and then I also put it on the front. So if I put it in the incubator and I have multiple containers stacked on top of each other, I can still see in the front. So I want to show you my incubator real quick, and I actually have, I think, 4 more boxes in there that are cooking already. I'm going to show you those, and I'm actually going to take those out, and we're going to replace the press and seal and check on those eggs. Alright, so this is my incubator setup. I actually built this incubator, and it's really simple to build an incubator. All you need is any kind of an enclosure. You can use a refrigerator or any kind of an insulated kind of a box or anything, and all you do is run heat tape on the sides and then run it on a heat controller. I just have a heat controller on the bottom that runs the whole thing, and then I actually have this hooked up to a battery backup. You can use any kind of a battery backup. That's just for like a computer. And if the power goes out for a few hours, the battery backup will definitely work. So this is actually a brand new beverage cooler. The compressor went out and some guy sold it on Craigslist, and I got it for a steal. And I actually can tell right away that there's no bad eggs in here because I open the door and it smells really good. if you have one bad egg, let me tell you, this whole thing stinks really bad. And if I have a bad egg, I like to kind of experiment and try to save it, put it in a separate box. I've never been able to save a bad egg. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 4 boxes out. This is the box that we just set up. I'm going to leave that one in there, and we'll take these 4 out, and we'll check out the eggs and replace the press and seal. Alright, so this box was my Lemon Blast crossed with my Coral Glow. That is going to be a really exciting cross. I'm actually hoping for a Coral Glow pinstripe or maybe a Lemon Blast Coral Glow, which would be really awesome. These are actually going to hatch on May 28th, and they'll start hatching on that date. And you can actually see there's some condensation that builds up on the top under the press and seal, and that's definitely what you want to get rid of. You want to stay on top of that. The last thing you want is this condensation raining down on the eggs, because it could make your eggs go bad. So I like to change all my press and seal on all my boxes every time I have a new batch of eggs. And you can see it dripped down, but it didn't drip on the eggs, which is nice. And these look really good. As a matter of fact, I've seen some eggs that are really, really extremely bad, and they still hatch. So eggs, you know, if you have one that looks really bad, even if it smells bad, you know, in most cases, I would actually continue the incubation, because you never know if a snake's going to crawl out of there. And I'd say probably all these will hatch no problem at all. So from here, I want to get some fresh press and seal. and put it on there. See if we can get this press and seal going here. And I think it's always good just kind of keep tabs on these eggs. Some people just, there's a lot of breeders that'll just set them and let them go and won't even look at them. And last year, I'd say I lost probably 10%, probably 10 eggs due to mold and fungus and pretty much improper care in here. This year, I'm cleaning and bleaching everything, staying on top of it. I'm changing the press and seal quite a bit. Pretty much every couple weeks I go through and replace the press and seal. So here's my next box. These are actually from a cross of a fire pied with a normal. So I'll get some fires. Everything will be 100% het pied. These are actually going to hatch on the 2nd of June. There's actually 2 reptile shows coming up. The first one that I'm going to go to is June 8th and 9th. That is Reptilian Nation. And even if these hatch before then, they won't have enough meals in them to be at the show. I might have some that might be ready, but this particular batch won't be ready. And these are kind of interesting. You can tell they were a little bit dirty when they were laid. They have a little bit of dirt on them, but let me tell you, these are perfectly fine. These will definitely hatch. And you can see one's kind of rolling around. I really don't like to touch them with my hands. I'm tempted to grab it and push it up against there. You know, if you're doing that, I would definitely wear some gloves. Maybe use a glove before you jump on there. These are actually vinyl gloves. I've never actually used these before. I thought I'd, try vinyl. It's kind of an interesting glove. And let's see, from here we want to do some press and seal. And you definitely really don't want it folded under like this. You want to get a good seal all the way around the top. And the interesting thing is these eggs, even when these eggs come out and there's hatchlings all in there, they're perfectly fine. They can breathe perfectly well with this press and seal. I've never had a problem with a press and seal with a whole bunch of hatchlings in there, as far as them having to breathe. So now this clutch is interesting because this might actually be ready for the next show. It's supposed to hatch on the 14th of May, so it's like 3 weeks before the show. This is actually a bamboo with het caramel albino. So these will be 50% het caramel albino. Half of them will be bamboos. And this is interesting because there's not a whole lot of condensation underneath the press and seal. So these are doing really well. And oh, this one is interesting. I had one that kind of collapsed here, and it almost looks like there wasn't enough humidity in here. Usually once you start out the incubation and you have some of them collapse, that is a pretty good indicator that you don't have enough humidity. And this one kind of had the little discoloration on it right from the beginning, and I was kind of wondering if that was going to be okay. And usually if they really collapse like this, they don't hatch, unfortunately. So that one I'd say is maybe 50-50, kind of a question mark. The other 4 look really good. So I want to put some new press and seal on this one. Oh, if I can get it out. All right. Hopefully those will be ready for the next show. So you may be wondering why there were so few eggs in that last box. It's because this is the other half of the clutch. It was actually a really big clutch. This is the exact same thing, a bamboo crossed with 100% het caramel albino. So these will be half bamboos and they'll all be 50% caramel albinos. I think it'd be interesting to eventually get a caramel albino bamboo, which I don't think I've ever seen. I think it'd be a pretty awesome snake. These look really good as well. There's a little bit of moisture, a little condensation underneath the press and seal. So it's good to go through and replace this pretty much I just replace it every time I get a clutch of eggs. If it goes probably, I would say if it goes probably 3 weeks, I'd probably, you know, if you don't have a lot of eggs going into the incubator where you're always checking on them, I'd probably replace it every 2 to 3 weeks. Alright, so there you have it. That is how I set up ball python eggs in the incubator. And now it's just the 2-month-long wait for those eggs to hatch. Let me tell you, that is the most exciting time of the year when you get those little baby snakes just peeking out of the shell and you're figuring out what you got as far as your odds. And sometimes the odds can play a trick on you. Sometimes if you mix a bamboo with a normal, you can get, on average, it's 50% bamboo, but sometimes you can get more normals, sometimes you get more bamboos, but you know, the more eggs you have, the more the odds are pretty much 50-50. And this year I'm expecting probably about 70 or 80 hatchlings. So let me tell you, I'm going to have a lot of snakes for sale at the upcoming shows. Speaking of shows, I'm going to do the next show, the Reptilian Nation, June 8th and 9th, 2019. And then the very following weekend is Repticon, and I'll be at both shows. Hopefully I'll have some of these hatchlings there. So I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.